Well, welcome again to the Privateers podcast, where we talk to people making a difference in Johannesburg, sharing some different ideas around business and business perspectives. Today, I'm joined by TJ Strydom, award-winning business journalist. TJ's written a number of business books, most recent being about Capitec. TJ, what I particularly enjoyed about that is the whole David-versus-Goliath dimension that you had in that book. So, TJ, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Olivier. Yeah, nice.
So tell us a little bit about the book. What got you into it? What got your attention about? Why would you write a book about Capitec?
Yeah, it has a long there's a long answer and a short answer. The short answer is no one else has written a book on Capitec.
Okay.
And it makes no sense that no one has actually taken the time to go and have a look at this, which is probably our best business in South Africa. I mean, if you look at South Africa Inc. over the last 20 years, this has to be one of the top 5, if not number 1, in terms of value created for shareholders, changing South Africa, you know, the landscape in South Africa and how people use a service, how people think about products, and, you know, pulling more people into the economy. So it has to be one of those best stories, but no one's written the book yet.
Yeah.
Not even Capitec themselves. I mean, they had an internal publication somewhere when they turned 20 years old, but again, it wasn't for everyone to consume. So that's the short answer. Is no one else has written the book. The longer answer is that I was sort of fortunate that this is the one business that I saw from the start all the way through to where it is now. So I was maybe second year, third year, when they started in Stellenbosch. And I was studying in Stellenbosch at the time. And I remember some of my mates, there was these whispers going around, I mean, buy Capitec shares when they listed in 2002. And I just didn't. But you started seeing these little branches popping up, one in Stellenbosch, one in a small town close by. And when I started working in Joburg in 2006, by then, Capitec had already proven itself to some extent to investors. It was already a success for PSG with the main funders. And I started sort of writing the odd story about it, interviewing people at PSG, started doing the classic old results story about Capitec. I think there's a story of mine somewhere in 2006. There's one in 2007. Those were my first years as a journalist. Yeah. And strangely, the rest of the financial press at the time didn't pay that much attention to Capitec.
I think to a certain extent it's almost understood because the market was so dominated by 4 players that had been entrenched for ages. Even a lot of international banks had tried to set up shop here and they couldn't break that monopoly of the 4.
And that's the thing, those are the giants. And those are the ones that Capitec stalked. And it obviously takes a long time to tell your own story that you're something different and that you're going to be a success. And strangely, yeah, no one really believed it. So I mean, I'm actually still answering your first question, which is I then wrote about it a little bit, and by 2009, I was frustrated with my own bank, one of those big 4.
Yes.
And I walked into a Capitec branch, middle of Pretoria. I was at the Reserve Bank covering a story, and I opened an account. And it was like the Twilight Zone. It was something completely different. And I thought, this is interesting. And I sort of kept tabs on the people involved there. I kept on interviewing people over the years, sort of building I wouldn't say it's a very, I mean, I didn't have a clear plan that I would write a book about it, but I thought it was interesting enough to follow. So, I mean, after 20 years of watching them, and obviously you sort of expect them to fail somewhere. Yeah. Because what's going to happen? Oh, there's the global financial crisis. There you have it. Oh, they won't survive that. Obviously, they survive it because they have the highest capital reserves of any bank that you probably find in the world at that time. Yeah. Then you have their biggest rival failing. You have African Bank going under. And you'd think, okay, that's it. This micro-lending thing, it was unsecured lending. It was a big experiment, and it just didn't work. But they come out of it, you know, stronger and better.
There are a couple of themes from a South African perspective that come out consistently. We've had G.G. Alcock speak to us recently about
yes.
the carcinomics and that whole unbanked informal sector of the economy, which is just really misunderstood. And there was the gap that Capitec walked into and went and did something different and made a huge difference in a market that people thought was unbankable.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Capitec had it, and I think if you look at the South African success stories, our businesses that, over time really made it. I mean, some of the ones that I've looked at is PEP,
Yes,
Shoprite to an extent, and then Capitec is a good example. What they saw is that they saw a bigger market in South Africa than any of the conventional wisdom at the time. So you've got the big four banks saying, oh, there are so many bankable people in South Africa. Let's get as many of them on board. Let's have a hard fight between us, and let's have this race to the top. So a suite of private banking services and all these other extras. And Capitec just saw that there's this whole part of the South African market that no one's paying real attention to. The thing is, you can try and market your products to them, but if you don't understand them, the way their lives work, what they do and what they need, then you can't sell anything to them. And I think that's what really distinguished them from the rest. Is those early executives, they walked the streets, they went to the taxi ranks. I think I said it in the book. Gerrie Fourie said he personally signed off the first 650 branches. After he'd been there, after he'd looked at exactly where they are going to operate.
Hands-on practical management, that true entrepreneurial grits that you need.
Exactly.
Through this practice, we obviously like to mentor a lot of young professionals coming through it. Are there any key entrepreneurial lessons that you think you've identified within the Capitec story, or even the Koos Bekker story, or the Christo story, that you think as a youngster, as a young TJ, these are the lessons you need to pay attention to, young man?
Young TJ wasn't an entrepreneur, unfortunately. I think in the Capitec story, the best thing, and this is Rian Stassen, the longtime CEO, he just said focus.
Yes.
There's a quote, it's not going to sell potatoes in the banking hall. Get your one thing that you do well. Hopefully it's sort of a small part of what someone else does. Compete there, beat the competition there, and then as soon as you're so good in that the rest of your competition can't ignore you, it's already too late for them, because then you can do this thing well. And Capitec took one small part of retail banking, which was a savings account and pretty simple lending products, and they became so good at delivering that and understanding that client that by the time the rest of the sort of the established banks realized that, it was too late because Capitec was too good. And then there's a lag of years before you can actually catch up.
Yeah.
And that's where they were fortunate that African Bank never went into retail banking. They were this monoline business that just did undersecured loans, because there was a viable competitor. Also, Standard Bank had all of the tools to go into that, in the early 2000s, and they decided to sort of can the business back then. And then you've got FNB in the early 2010s catching up and really going into unsecured lending and personal loans around that time. But again, not all of those things at the same time. So the focus gave Capitec full control of that little part of their way of doing business. But then the interesting thing is that little part can grow into, or has grown into, 24 million, 25 million clients. I mean, I don't know when someone is watching this interview of ours, but it's a moving target. Capitec clients will probably be even more by then. And so that to me, the focus was a clear lesson, such a clear lesson.
And that's a common lesson coming from a number of CEOs, is that absolute focus on what makes them different from somebody else. TJ, I know you're also a history buff, like I'm a history nerd, a Joburg history nerd. We like to go and talking just pre the cameras coming on about a little bit of Joburg history. Do you think maybe some of those older challenges were held back by their history, held back by the way that they always did business?
I think they were held back by their success. The thing is, the South African banking sector was quite advanced by the time Capitec came around. But they were profitable, big businesses with a steady client base, and the South African economy was growing. I mean, when we talk about this time, Capitec was founded in 2001. So from 2001 all the way to 2008, you've got an expanding economy. So that means your middle-class clients and your upper-end clients, they're also growing. It's also going better with them. So clearly, if you're one of the big four banks and you're servicing them, you don't have to look around for the other customers. And I think that in that sense, it was lucky for South Africa. I think that someone was looking out for the other customers and wanted to make a business case, not a charity case, to serve more South Africans. And that, I think, is sort of the wonderful thing about the Capitec story is they could make a profitable business, by serving people that didn't have access before, whereas the big four banks said, no, we're not going to go there. Yeah. It's not profitable for us. And it was. All you needed to do was reimagine it from the start. And I think the biggest problem for the big four banks is they had these legacy systems and their way of doing things and massive overheads and, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees all together sitting doing the old form of banking, which they were very good at. They were very efficient at doing that. But, it was clear that there was a leapfrogging opportunity right there. Capitec took it. And then since then, I think they've been very good at also recognizing that they themselves could have legacy systems very soon. So they kept on innovating. And then because they had this very low cost base, they could keep updating their systems and keep doing very simple things over and over and over again, focusing on the one thing. And in the end, I think they just built a business that is so much more efficient. I think there's one quote that I got from Gerrie Fourie, the longtime CEO, who's now recently retired, and he said, if someone else will grant you a loan in a day, we're going to try and do it in, I think he said 30 minutes. And I mean, that's a massive difference. If you think just of the number of people you can serve then, because time is obviously money, and the poorer you are, the
more relevant that is.
The more relevant it is.
You're going into the bank, into the infrastructure to go and get that. You've taken a day's off, or there is
exactly
an intervention that's been required for you to get there, and you need a decision quickly.
Well, you would have exchanged your time for cash. I mean, if you're a factory worker, you've got shifts and you've got, it's sort of clear. You get paid per hour. Yeah. So you know exactly what that is worth. The difference is for your typical private banking client is, it depends on when we're talking about here, but if it was the early 2000s, they'd never get into a bank. They'd just send someone to go and sort out that stuff. Or now, I mean, they'd get a sort of this wonderful treatment and a cup of coffee and you go and sit down and whatever. But they don't have to take off time that they now don't get paid for. It's just, they just schedule it and then you go for your half an hour and you speak to your private banker.
There were two interesting pieces of information that came past my desk recently, and I thought they probably both tied neatly into the Capitec story. That is, we would talk about the banking of the unbanked previously, and how all of that worked. But Harry actually had some comments that he was making recently about what the real unemployment rate was in this country. It was a little bit controversial to some, but probably his view is more aligned with our view on it. And that you had this influx of people entering the banking sector. And we had Gigi Alcock last week talking here about how many of those Capitec accounts were actually being utilized by entrepreneurs to run their businesses, whatever those businesses might look like in their personal capacities. And I think that speaks to an entrepreneurial group saying, here's a whole bunch of entrepreneurs we can go and help, and part of the South African DNA. And
I think the interesting thing is, you wonder, why would Capitec go into business banking? Why would they do that?
Yes.
And I mean, they did something that's not really characteristic for them. They bought a business instead of building it themselves. So they were keen to go in. And it's obviously because they have the data. Obviously because they've been looking at what people actually use their accounts for. And that tells them there's a great opportunity there. And the knock-on effect will be, if they get it right, the knock-on effect will be amazing.
So everyone speaks about Capitec as personal bankers, but you're quite right. That move into business banking is fairly significant within this practice. We can see within our client base that they are making inroads within their client base. People that have been banking with traditional banks now are looking at Capitec for business banking.
Anecdotally, most of the complaints I've heard about Capitec was from new business bank clients. But I think it obviously takes some time to get that system going. And again, I mean, it's not statistically, it's anecdotally. But it is something that they've got such a strong brand. They've got to get it right for them to benefit fully from that. Because, maybe a retail client can be forgiving, but a business client, they need to do payments. The system needs to be up and running all the time. It depends on who you're trying to attract. But if you want very big corporate accounts to come your way, then that has to run smoothly. I think they're lucky in the sense that everyone else's business banking outfits haven't been running that smoothly. Anecdotally, you'd hear just as many complaints about insert big four name here, and I think but still, there's the opportunity. If they get that right, maybe you get the same sort of revolution that you got in retail banking, but only for small businesses, which would be amazing.
So TJ, you clearly are attracted by businesses that have an entrepreneurial spirit. You've got the Christo and you've got the Koos, probably two of South Africa's leading entrepreneurs. And you've got the PSG-backed Capitec. What drives you to writing about those characters?
So again, the thing with all three of these books, and I was surprised that there'd never been a book written about Christo Wiese. Never been a book written about Koos Bekker. Short book by Anton Haber, but never sort of a real commercial product out there that people can read. And how many. I was also surprised about how many great lessons there are in both their lives, and then obviously the Capitec story too. So that's sort of the reason I wanted to write the book. The other thing is, they're men of my father's generation, the Afrikaners. So I sort of understand a little bit where they're coming from and the sort of the way of thinking about things. And I think that needs to be unpacked by someone who sort of has an insight into that. I don't know, but if you look at a biography of whatever, I'm reading The House of Morgan now, which is this Ron Chernow take on JP Morgan, his father and his son, and the whole empire, banking empire. And if you look at that thing, it's as thick as all three of those books together. And a proper biography written by an academic or by someone funded by a foundation, it usually turns into a 500 to 1,000-page book. The thing is, I want people to be able to read something on the airplane. We've discussed this offline earlier, because I think there are lessons in there.
Been acquired at the airport, about to board a plane, because they're convenient to read while you fly.
I wish they could sell it on the plane. It would be brilliant if they come past with a trolley and say, "Sorry, sir, we see you're not reading anything. Would you like a Koos Bekker book?" But and that's where I think, people who fly a lot, they are typically sort of my target market. That's, they go to different parts of South Africa or different parts of the world, so they see different things. So it means they're hungry also to look at whatever lessons there might be in this.
You mentioned a couple of the entrepreneurial lessons. Do you want to share one or two that stand out?
Yeah, so, I think Koos was this sort of amazing at distilling what the thing is he wanted to sell in the end. Even if he didn't tell his shareholders that directly, I think he knew exactly what he was going to do. The early days of Mnet is, that should be a book on its own. But the early days of Mnet is fascinating. The way he just walks in and pitches to a newspaper publisher that they want to bring pay TV to South Africa. And they say, well, whatever. Okay, we'll help you, but in the end, they have to pitch to government or whoever in sort of this morass of bureaucracy decides on who gets a broadcasting license. This is 1984, 85, 86. It's around that time. And again, I mean, I spoke to someone who was at his presentation there. I mean, you have Bill Venter from Altron coming in saying, no, we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. You have Sol Kersner's group coming in saying, we're going to sort of do this. This was the three big pitches. Yeah. Koos Bekker comes in with something that looks like a PowerPoint presentation, but this is the mid-80s. And the people are suitably impressed. So he knows how to sell the idea of something to someone else. Mm-hmm. Storytelling, as you said earlier, we were speaking offline. So, I mean, yeah, as a young man, he was editor of the Marty and Stellenbosch. Maybe some of that stuck. Yeah. But, and then obviously his strategy of chucking spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. Yeah. It's that thing. He was willing to take massive risks at a time. I mean, the Tencent investment by Naspers, depending on who you ask and what sort of window you use to judge it, what sort of time window, it was very much a last or a close to the last roll of the dice for Naspers on an international strategy at the time, and made several investments in China that all went to naught, and then this one just stuck.
Shot the lights out
amazingly, and. Yeah, I mean, I think that the quote of his that I don't think is an original quote of his, but that also always sticks for me and it's sort of related to him taking 3% of the growth of the company as opposed to a salary. But he said a gun against the head really concentrates the mind, which I think you can see some pretty
singular focus.
Pretty decent concentration there. So Christo to me it's interesting. I mean, he's over 80 years old now. He is just incredibly sharp. I mean, you have a conversation with him. He recalls numbers from many years back, small numbers, big numbers from transactions. It's really uncanny. And I think just the network of people he's built up over the years, how many people he knows and what he knows about them, very interesting. But he, I think he's always been good, except for that one example of Steinhoff. Very good at finding a way to invest in something.
Yes,
and getting it at the right price. Even his own investment in what became his wealth vehicle over all those years, Pepkor, back in the day. It was at a time when the founder wanted to exit, had lots of things that moved him to do something else. One of the strong other executives in the business, Whitey Basson at the time, was in Pepkor, obviously basically running the show in the years that Christo was doing something else. So Christo started with Pepkor in the 60s already, and then when they listed, he went and did his own thing in Cape Town. Joined the Cape Bar, bought a diamond mine, the kind of things you do in your 30s. And by the end of sort of the 70s, it was clear that Renier van Rooyen, who was the founder of PEP, wanted to exit. And Christo got the finance, bought him out at the time that he needed, and they transformed that business. I mean, in the next half a decade, it really grew. They really got that thing down. But it was clear that the demographics in South Africa, urbanization, all of those things were working together, that whatever you're going to do, PEP stores will do well. And they were branching into groceries. And that thing obviously took very long to get going. But still, by where are we now with Shoprite? It is a giant.
It is a giant. All three of these businesses have benefited off this growing middle class. So this rising tide that raises all these vessels.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think of Mnet and Pay TV, they saw the South African market as much bigger than any of the conventional wisdom than the conventional wisdom was at the time. So I mean, no one thought that. I say no one. No one at the SABC in the mid-1980s thought people would want to watch more than 2 hours of television per day. So why would you have so many movies and sport and whatever on a pay TV channel? It just wouldn't make sense. Why would you have this 24-hour entertainment cycle? Because people, I mean, the flag waved at the end of the day, and then the broadcast only starts the next morning again.
Yeah.
But Koos and his team saw that the market was there. People are willing to watch, and then they saw that also, okay, pay TV is one thing, but they were expert in moving this sort of satellite offering to lower income groups.
Yeah.
You drive past any township in South Africa, and you see dishes everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, that speaks to them seeing the market as bigger than the conventional wisdom thought it was.
Yeah, and that business has kind of gone whole journey now. It's about to delist off the JSE. It's been taken out by Canal Plus.
Bizarrely, yeah. Whereas Canal Plus was their competition back in the day. The sort of first other pay TV business outside of the US. But yeah, I mean, in a way, there's a little bit sad. I mean, South African breweries, I think, is another example of a South African grown business with lots of experience here.
Huge IP.
Incredible. And it was someone bought it. The bankers would say, oh, they overpaid, but they're probably going to earn it out over time, and that's going to be an amazing investment. But the sort of homegrown part of that, I mean, building a world-winning business from, well, it depends on where you say SAB's headquarters is, but it was down here in Jan Smuts Avenue for many years.
One of the lowest cost producers globally of beer.
Absolutely. So I'm working on a book now about the Charles Glass, the original Castle Brewery founder. That's why I'm so interested in the early Joburg. But he got here in 1887, started a brewery that was where the Carlton Centre is now.
Yeah.
So
where the miners are.
Center of town. I mean, he was so close. He could cart it with a wagon. I mean, a horse-drawn trolley. He carted his stouts and his ales all the way. Well, I say all the way. Very close. But anyway, that was sort of the start of it all. And you think, oh, okay, brilliant. Someone's identified a market. That's it. But the people that came after, they just refined that business strategy. I mean, some of the things that they did in the second half of the 20th century. I mean, Castle was their dominant brand for all those years. They introduced Black Label, an American beer made in Canada or licensed from Canadians, but still they introduced that as competition for themselves. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
So I mean and what is what's sort of what happens then is you broaden the market because you're not cannibalizing your Castle drinkers with Black Label drinkers. You're broadening the category of beer because your real competition is wine, and in South Africa at that time was wine and brandy and whatever.
The other thing that these stories all have in common, something that's sitting in your history as well, is the whole Stellenbosch connection. Why do you think there's so many prominent South African businesses that have their roots there?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is lots of these guys studied in Stellenbosch, and lots of them retired in Stellenbosch or bought wine farms, and so there's but they built their businesses in other parts of the country. Yeah. So I think the network from Stellenbosch is something that they retained, but I don't think it's only true of Stellenbosch. You could draw a line around parts of certain suburbs of Pretoria, and you'll get the same. Certain suburbs in Joburg, you'll get the same idea of a network. But I think there was, and I go into it in the Capitec book a little bit. There's something to the fact that Anton Rupert and the whole Rembrandt, later Remgro empire chose Stellenbosch as its headquarters. So there was always this sort of bigger success story to look at as an example.
Okay.
And I think you have I mean, quite clearly, lots of the Capitec guys worked in these liquor businesses of the broader Rupert Empire, and it was a training ground. So I don't think it's not necessarily the university, but that's great for networks and for getting to know people. Then, I mean, very important in the Capitec story is Yanni Maton of the PSG group. I mean, Yanni studied there, came up to the Transvaal and had a quite a good business here until he. I mean, you must have read his book, and then they fired me,
Exactly.
and then he started over in Stellenbosch. So the thing is, Stellenbosch is very attractive because it's quite picturesque. It has a small town feel, or at least in the mid 90s, early 2000s. I mean, it's growing quite a lot now. It's close to an international airport, and then there is sort of depth and an established business community there. So I think you're relatively close to capital, so you can get some proper meetings there if you want to. But in Joburg, the same. You can get enough meetings, enough access to capital.
It always fascinates me how you get these pockets of concentration, and they kind of stick out. And even in a sporting term, we were talking about it recently at one of our staff events, that there's a small little 30-kilometer radius in the Adriatic that every single water polo gold medalist has been born in the last 30 years. And you go and talk about the concentration of rugby skills that sit here in South Africa. You have these little pockets of excellence, and maybe it is that influence that you get from those around you becomes inherent in the culture.
I think so. I think it becomes uncool to not do well in the thing that you do there. And I mean, it's like you find artist communities in other parts of the world too. I think their artistry was just business. And there are more stories. I think that's the exciting thing is these guys had to have a very South African focus. I mean, Mnet as a pay TV business was a South African business until sort of the barriers that was keeping South Africa cordoned off, until that opened up a little bit and the Iron Curtain fell and so there were those opportunities. For Pepkor, to some extent, it was the same. I mean, Capitec is mostly a South African business. But the interesting thing now, I think, is that the startups that you see now are often built with the idea of the world market in mind.
Yes.
Which I think they didn't have that.
They didn't have that luxury.
No, but also they were selling different kind of products. So I mean, if you're selling groceries or clothing, you know, it becomes an export thing, or you need to go and replicate in other countries. You have to have a very good model to then have other people want to do that, want you there. I think pay TV was at that stage in the 90s where it was young enough in Europe and foreign enough in Europe, and was so fragmented there that they could roll it out there, and the same probably in the Far East. Banking, you know, as the Capitec guys say, to get another banking license in another country, let's say you even go to a small country like Malawi, I mean, for one branch, you need all those overheads that you would typically need for a lot. So it's sort of banking is, especially retail banking, the sort of the thing that they do, and that's why the South African banks were so good at defending their turf here. It doesn't really cross borders in the same way.
Yeah.
And
TJ, if we have a look at change our gaze a little bit to South Africa as a whole.
Yeah.
What do you see from a South African perspective? Do you see pockets of opportunity? What worries you at night? What do you think about?
Those are
loaded questions.
No, yeah, it has several prongs, but pockets of opportunity. I mean, even in the most dismal places, there are like pockets of opportunity. So I think whoever focuses on solving our problems, whether that is in local government and there is some sort of private sector solution for that, will do very well. And I think there are ways to do to do that. I mean, I think the same. There's so many ways to make people's lives easier now with the tech that we have. You just need imaginative entrepreneurs to build those businesses. So I think in South Africa there's that. The sad thing is, what makes it more difficult is obviously any entrepreneur, early on, you need your costs to be as low as possible. If some of your costs are, unfortunately, getting to your place or to your client, or it's more difficult for your clients or whatever, if that's a pothole or a roadblock or a burst water pipe or whatever it is, that just makes it more difficult. So your cost of doing business is higher. So, I mean, if we can solve local government, that would be amazing. But I think that's also a process. So for everyone to sit and wait for that to happen immediately, I don't think that's going to happen overnight.
I think the South African trend is we don't wait for government to solve the problems, we solve them ourselves.
And I think it's a positive thing. I think that's people taking ownership of what their problems are, and that means there's a business case. There's usually a business case in. I mean, I want to say in government failure. It always sounds. It sounds so fatalistic, but if you look at the business that PSG built in Kuro, or the business was already there when they invested, but if you look at the business that has been built there, I mean, what was it based on? It was based on getting a school up and running very quickly, which is something that government can't do.
Yeah.
I think I need to think whether this is a number I'm making up or whether someone told me that it takes from the moment they identified a site, and this is a few years ago, it took them 7 months to have the school standing there.
Wow.
So that is, I mean, if it's true, I mean, let people at home please fact check me. But the thing is, if you think of that kind of delivery, and they're not doing anything special. The school doesn't look, it's not technically that much more.
It's done with private sector efficiency.
It's someone who needs to get it done because they have shareholders. And they have a next quarter and the next annual results that they want to get out. And then they want that thing to earn in the next quarter.
And when you interact with these CEOs, what is their sentiment towards the country?
So the thing is, these guys are that older now. So you mentioned Gary Fourie earlier. I mean, he's in his 60s now. But he's very positive, for example. I think most of the guys that I've interacted with in these books, they have sort of a solution mindset. I mean, fair enough. All of these books are unauthorized, so maybe they have different conversations with people privately. I don't know, but I think again back to the earlier point, they see opportunities in South Africa. Mm-hmm. South Africa is a massive market, and there are many things that haven't been solved. So, I mean, that creates an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So the less red tape there could be, the better it would be, because we would get to those things quicker. Yeah. And that's unfortunately the thing. I mean, it feels like it always comes down to cutting red tape or deregulating. I mean, the whole Capitec story is about one piece of deregulation back in the 90s. That's how it started. And then it became this force that gathered momentum.
Yeah, one simple piece of deregulation.
One simple thing that just said, listen, our lending is clogged up.
Exactly.
Small.
I'd forgotten about that particular point until I read the book. I mean, it was a nothingness at the time that became a massive issue.
It became a massive thing because no one could get access to credit. Yeah. Or again, small borrowers couldn't get access to credit, and that clogs it up.
We've just come off the back to say that government can create hindrances, but there's an example of proactive decision-making around micro-lending by the then Minister of Finance that changed things overnight.
And I think the great thing about that was they didn't think this was the end of it all. They said, let's try something. Yeah. And I think and they tried it. And I mean, within 18 months, Trevor Manuel was the new minister, wanted to reverse it. But by then, it had become too big. Yeah. It had become an important part of people's. It was solving a problem.
Yes.
So if you have to then go back and tell, hundreds of thousands of clients, listen, your problem's not going to be solved anymore because we decided we're going to re-regulate or this or that. It just becomes something.
Market had moved on.
Yeah, and that's a sad thing when it comes to things like power generation over the last 2 decades in South Africa. there were many of those opportunities to do something, to take a chance on something. And it would have probably worked out better than building 2 massive coal-fired power plants that, are expensive and inefficient.
Yeah.
Efficient at burning coal, but, probably not as efficient as using sunlight in the end.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's me losing track.
So, what I like about all of these books, TJ, is it talks to that South African spirit, that entrepreneurialness that I think is inherent in our DNA here as South Africans. Just a can-do attitude, kind of despite the odds almost. The David and Goliath story is what we really love.
Yeah. And if South Africa is going to be a success, then you'll have these kind of guys imparting that knowledge on more and more South Africans, and you'll have lots more people going with that gung-ho mindset of, let's just solve what's ailing us. Let's not wait for
others to do it for us.
Yeah, we wait for the rest of the world to come to our aid and to see how nice we are. It's not going to be that. It's going to be us that solves South Africa's problems. And there are. So for me, it's very interesting if I look at the 3 books. I think the third one was much better because it looked at a company. It wasn't a person. It looked at how do you build a company? How did someone else build a company? It's not there are lessons in that. And I think that would be my model going forward. I'll write about companies. Charles Glass excluded. That's a passion project.
When is that book likely to come out?
Let me not say, otherwise I'm going to be held to it. But then hopefully sometime in the next year or so, I'm hoping. Right. But I might write something else before that, which I'm quite excited about. Also, a business that was built relatively quickly, more or less over the same time period as Capitec.
Capitec in the making.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. But that's going to be the model, I think. Write about a business, because again, this is quite anecdotal, but conversations I've had about this book and conversations I've seen on platforms like LinkedIn, and the kind of questions I get about it at book launches and events is people really want to know how to build businesses in South Africa. Yeah, and they want examples of people who've done it successfully. And unfortunately, I think maybe it's the publishing industry, or maybe it's just the size of our market, but I don't think enough books are being written with sort of that angle. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Fantastic. Yeah. TJ, thank you very much for sharing your story and sharing these 3 stories with everybody. And I can't wait to read the 2 upcoming books that you've mentioned. That when you do get to the one about Charles Glass, we'll enjoy a beer together. We'll have that nonsense about.
My beers are tax deductible now, Olivier, because obviously it's all in creation of that book. So.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
TJ, thanks very much for joining us on the Privateers podcast.
Lovely.
The conversation's been fascinating.
Excellent questions, and thank you again.
Thank you.